Boogie woogie oogie, my dudes. I've been thinking about this for a little while now, and the more that I think about it, the more it actually begins to make some sense in my head. I've been watching TMG, Tiny Meat Gang, Cody Ko, and Noel Miller making music now for a few years, I think. I mean, we're going back at least a year of them making music. If you ask me, they make better music than a lot of YouTube comedy artists. You know, like for people who are making comedy music, it's pretty listenable. The first YouTube group that I really saw explode from doing this kind of thing was The Lonely Island. The Lonely Island had a really big back catalog of just like music videos with really big artists. I mean, they've worked with a ton of people. Pharrell, P. Diddy, Kendrick Lamar, Justin Timberlake, Rihanna, Lady Gaga, The Roots, Akon, which at the time Akon was like nuts, T-Pain, you know? And they just got a movie. There's a ton of really large artists who co-sign, because I think there's a bunch of artists who make music that would just be really willing to make comedy music as just like a change of pace, and it gets them a different audience. The Lonely Island was able to grow, or at least Andy Samberg was able to grow into a really big and successful solo career. And now obviously Jorma and Akiva haven't had as much success on their own, but obviously Andy Samberg isn't leaving them behind. I'm assuming those two are writers, but they're just not really on the screen is what I'm getting at. But Noel Miller and Cody Ko, you only have to focus on two people. Andy Samberg, I feel like, was the clear star of the three of them. While I might have preferred Jorma or Akiva's comedy here and there, Andy Samberg was the clear different person who was ready for all this to happen in his life. And he was ready for that SNL cosign, basically, I guess you could call it. They really transformed The Lonely Island into one of the bigger comedy music groups on the planet. I mean, the whole SNL digital skit wasn't a thing until Andy Samberg and The Lonely Island went and made SNL digital skits. Now that's the biggest thing that happened with SNL. And of course, then you take what happened with The Lonely Island, right? And obviously The Lonely Island found bigger artists to co-sign them earlier on. If you look at TMG, I mean, they've worked with someone to the likes of Black Bear, who has a large audience of his own. I think TMG, if I'm not mistaken, TMG signed to Arista Records in 2019. So the music that they're making is under a record label, and a record label is gonna fund their music for sure. It seems like the budget is going up and up with TMG. It seems like it's slowly getting to, obviously, The Lonely Island wasn't insanely high budgeted out the get-go. I mean, they were making just videos at home. TMG had that feel and now is slowly kind of developing into what looks like real music, but with funny content matter. Again, the only parallel I could really draw to them is The Lonely Island. And if you look at how The Lonely Island's career worked out, it worked out really well. The title of this video obviously being Can Tiny Meat Gang Win a Grammy, I think they have a better shot to than The Lonely Island. I want to look up when, but The Lonely Island was nominated for a Grammy. They were nominated for Best Rap and Sung Collaboration for I'm on a Boat in 2010. I mean, obviously the Emmys gave a little bit more nod to The Lonely Island. They've been nominated a bunch. They've only ever won one Emmy. To have been nominated for 2 Grammys, one of which was Best Comedy Album, Best Rap and Sung Collaboration for I'm on a Boat. But again, it like Best Comedy Album makes sense. Turtleneck and Chain made sense in 2012 to be put in that comedy album category with the people who were nominated in 2012. I mean, obviously Weird Al Yankovic has done something similar. Louis C.K. obviously winning Best Comedy Album in 2012. Between Weird Al and I guess now The Lonely Island, there was nobody who really was making comedy music albums that were getting nominated for Best Comedy Album. To have just gotten straight up Best Rap and Sung Collaboration when something like Jay-Z featuring Rihanna and Kanye West's Run This Town won, but The Lonely Island's I'm on a Boat gets nominated. I think the ceiling is really high for someone like Tiny Meat Gang. What's stopping them from being there? You know, they have the label connection. They're putting together solid sounding music. Maybe it's not a shock value funny, it's more subtle funny, and I think it's gonna take a little bit more getting used to. I mean, I think they're producing their own music too, if I'm not mistaken. I know Noel produces and Cody produces. I think what it's gonna come down to is whenever they're writing like hits and they get their hit song, because none of these that they've put out I feel like have been like those ones. I feel like Short King's Anthem with Black Bear was their first like attempt at like a Lonely Island type song like that. The Lonely Island always built it around one big idea, whereas most of TMG seems like these are just songs that have the potential to sound good or funny, however you want to listen to them. Their most recent song, Daddy, sparked this because, again, they've worked with now another really, really big artist. Quinn has, let me see, he's got 8 million monthly listeners, and that's another song that had that full concept behind it, you know? know? It's not just a song that sounds real, but also has some comedy elements. It's like, no, this was a comedy song pretty much through and through. That's parallel to something like The Lonely Island. So I just want to again talk and say, like, I could see TMG winning a Grammy in his future. It's going on this really big transgressional path where if I look at their monthly listeners, right, it's like 1.7. They have a bunch of songs with a bunch of plays. You're not really throwing them on in the whip yet. They're not there yet, but they're really good, and there's no taking away from it. I just feel like their writing is a little under par here and there, but even still, Tiny Meat Gang could eventually win a Grammy in its career. I don't see why it couldn't, especially if Arista has the label connections and the label pulls to get it nominated, which is really all it takes. I mean, if you look at who was nominated for Best Rap Album, that's all label shit at the Grammys now. Everything having to do with the Grammys now is label shit. If TMG puts out a song that does Lonely Island numbers, you figure TMG's at 1.7, and their most popular song has around like 75 million plays. The Lonely Island has around the same amount of monthly listeners now. That's why I bring them up as well. The Lonely Island 10 years later has the same amount of monthly listeners as TMG. I Just Had Sex was like everywhere. I'm on a Boat was like everywhere, and this is pre-streaming. I mean, I Just Had Sex has 130 million plays on Spotify. Like, it is the perfect comedy song as far as like in the 2000s standards, you know? And I'm on a Boat has like 60 mil. So TMG is doing equal numbers to them. They just don't have as strong of a back catalog yet to really be throwing them in any conversation. They haven't been around long enough or doing numbers long enough. Why can't they eventually get there? I don't know. I mean, and if you don't think that they can, I think that's a little crazy. I think they have a really high ceiling, and I think it's worth talking about.